Hello, how are you doing? So very soon I'm going to be going on holiday for almost 2 weeks. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into some quality reading time and relaxation. And I have a group of new books that I just got recently that I've been sorting through and trying to decide what I want to take with me on holiday. So I thought I'd show them and give descriptions of them and why I'm interested in reading them. I'd love to know if you've read any of these books or if you're interested in reading any of these books. And also, just recently, I finished reading the entire Booker longlist, which was quite a project. It always feels like almost like a set, sort of like school project of reading a set amount of books. And now I just have the freedom to read whatever I want, which is quite delightful and exciting. But an interesting thing that came out of reading the Booker long list, since two South African writers were on the list, and I talked about this in my shortlist predictions video that I made, that both of these writers are white and they're writing about race. And so I'd really like to read some Black South African writers to get a different perspective on stories that include issues to do with race in South Africa today. And there was a article on Book Riot that was published a year ago about Black South African writers that are writing about race. And the thing about that article is that it's really difficult to get access to a lot of these books. Not many of them are published in the UK or have sort of gone out of print and so aren't readily available. But one author whose book I was able to get is called The Zulus of New York by Zakes. And this is a novel that's set towards the end of the 1800s and is about a group of traveling performers that's overseen by an impresario known as the Great Farini. And the group of performers are former Zulu warriors who are now performing dances for the sakes of American and English audiences. And so it's told from the perspective and focuses on the perspectives on a number of these individuals in this performing troupe and what that experience is like. And it's such a fascinating subject matter and a different way of looking at the issues to do with race and colonialism and all of that. So yeah, this sounds like such a fascinating writer who I hadn't heard of before coming across this article, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to this book. Just recently, it was also my birthday, and my wonderful friend Christy in America, who I've known for a very long time, sent me a book for my birthday. And this is a book of short stories which has been published in America but hasn't been published here in England. So I'm really grateful that she sent me this, and it has deckled edges, and so you know it came from America. And so this is Skinship by Yoon Choi, and these are short stories about the experiences of Korean Americans who are first generation and second generation, and yeah, is about a number of different stories, but often to do with discovering who the people we love really are and examining the deep relationship we feel with them. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading some of these short stories. And since I'm going on holiday with my partner, and I often talk about how my partner and I like to read short stories aloud to each other, it's great to have a new collection to do that. And also it just has a very beautiful cover, doesn't it? Another new collection of short stories that I have and that I want to dip into is The Song of Youth by Montserrat Roig, and it is translated from the Catalan by Tiago Miller. And so the author, Montserrat Roig, she was an author and journalist and feminist activist who died in 1991, but she often wrote about the plight of women under Franco's regime and how they were sort of silenced during that. And these are short stories that concern that experience. And the author Con Toibin wrote about this author that Montserrat Roig, before her untimely death, was a shining light of Catalan literature. The stories in The Song of Youth show her at her most urgent, energetic, and inventive. While most of the stories are clearly set in the Catalonia of the 1970s and 1980s, they also have have the quality of timeless fable. And I just think that sounds so fascinating. And, we just had Women in Translation Month in August, but I hope that will carry on into September and in all months going forward. Keeping the House by Tija Sin. This is a new novel all about the Turkish drug trade in North London and follows the experiences of 3 generations of individuals that are very intimately involved in this. And I love to read multi-generational stories, and also I love to read about different communities in London. So I think this sounds like a really fascinating novel, and also it comes with a quote from Caleb Azuma Nelson, whose novel Open Water I read earlier this year. And he says that this novel thrums with feeling, illustrating the London community with a sharp and confident eye. Her characters are full and sure and traverse their worlds with humor, boldness, and love. Hope fills these pages. A New Name by Jon Fosse, and it's translated from the Norwegian by Damien Searles. And so this is part of a multi-book series. This edition includes books 6 and 7 of the Septology series, and I've only read the first book, the Other Name, in this group, and it's such a fascinating, different kind of writing. I mean, he's often quite likened to Samuel Beckett in that he explores these kind of existential questions, and so the story is about a aging painter named Asle, who lives in a remote part of Norway and doesn't have much communication with other people, and he's sort of turning over in his mind events from his past. And also in the nearby village is another painter also called Asle, who is a kind of doppelganger for him. And so you see their parallel lives, how one sort of degenerated into depression and alcoholism, and the other one became this sort of resigned life of spirituality. And so this follows his story as it goes into the Christmas period, where he meets with a neighbor of his to share in a dish called lutefisk, which is, I think, a white fish, which is preserved in lime and is particular to Norway. It sort of sounds like something that Rose Nylund would create in the Golden Girls. But yeah, it's such a fascinating way that he writes, and so I want to go back and read the second part of this series and then get to the third book, because he addresses questions to do with memory and identity in such a unique way that I'm looking forward to reading more of his work. Now, as I mentioned sometimes, I also like to read and learn more about the cosmos and the universe around us, and so I have a couple of new nonfiction books that are to do with that. The first is called The Human Cosmos by Jo Marchant, and it's about the history of civilization's relationship with the stars and how we've been kind of disconnected from the universe. I mean, whenever I try to talk with my partner about the universe, he's not really that interested, which I can sort of understand in a way, because we should just be concerned with what's going on in the world around us that we actually live on, rather than looking up at the sky. But this book argues that we really should try to rekindle that connection we have with the stars and outer space. And so, yeah, it's looking at the history of that relationship throughout time and in different civilizations. And I just think that sounds like a really fascinating way to approach it. Then there is The Red Planet by Simon Morden, and this is looking at the planet of Mars and the history of that. And this author is a geologist and geophysicist, and so he really understands the landscape of this other planet, and he tries to tell it in a compelling way, almost like a story way, like in fiction, because he's also a writer of science fiction. But this is a nonfiction book looking at the technical details of the planet and the the history of the planet and what we understand about the evolution of Mars over time, or what we think we understand about it. The Earthspinner by Anuradha Roy, and it's published by a publisher I've not come across before called Mountain Leopard Press. And the story is about someone who practices the art of pottery, and how that's a very like ancient art, but where it's about where history meets the present. And also the story moves between a remote village in India and England, and so it's about where the East meets the West, and it involves a number of different mythologies, and so sounds like a fascinating story. My Body Keeps Your Secrets by Lucia Osborne-Crowley, and the author describes this book as a non-fiction novel, which I think sounds really intriguing, and it involves the stories of a number of different women and trans and non-binary people expressing their relationship with their own bodies to do with gender identity and sexuality, and also abuse and trauma and violation. And so yeah, it sounds like such an intriguing premise. Magpie by Elizabeth Day, and I had the pleasure of meeting this author recently at the Women's Prize for Fiction party and celebration, and she kindly sent me a copy of her novel with this lovely little note saying that she's a fan of the Women's Prize videos that I do with Anna, and she was just a lovely person, and she was one of the judges for this year's prize. And so her new novel is about a woman who has just met a man relatively recently, but decided that she wants to settle down with him and try to start a family with him. And so as they're making a home for themselves, they take in a lodger, and that lodger is a woman that takes a very keen interest in their lives and starts to become quite an intrusive presence. And so it's about the sort of thrilling mystery of that situation. The Second Woman by Louise May, and this is another novel which could be classified as a kind of thriller. It's about a woman that sees a man discussing on television how he lost his wife and how she's disappeared. And she takes such sympathy with him that she seeks him out, and they form a connection with each other and start having a relationship. But then the first wife returns, and he is not everything that she thought that he was, and so it's about the intriguing mystery of that. Palmares by Gayl Jones, and this book is such an exciting event because this is the first novel that this author has published in over 20 years, and she's become quite a recluse. And so she published this really powerful, beautiful novel a long time ago called Corregidora, and it's the story of a blues singer and her life. And this author was first discovered and published by Toni Morrison, who you can see a quote here, and she says that no novel about any black woman could ever be the same after this, which is quite a statement coming from Toni Morrison. And so Palmares is the novel about a woman that is enslaved in Brazil and hears about a fabled community called Palmares. Well, or maybe it's not fabled, maybe it's a real place where slaves live free and make their own lives for themselves. And so it's about the history of Portuguese slave trade and colonialism. And so yeah, it sounds like such a fascinating, moving story that involves a lot of magic and mythology, and her writing style is just so distinct and original that I think it's so exciting that she has this new novel coming out. The Wrong End of the Telescope by Rabih Alameddine, and this is the story of a Lebanese doctor who travels to a Greek island to assist with a number of refugees that have ended up there, and she encounters there a Syrian matriarch who is suffering from a terminal illness, and she's keeping this illness from her family and doesn't want them to find out about it. So it's about the connection between these two women and the drama of this situation. And finally, there is Snow Country by Sebastian Faulks, and this is a historical novel set at the beginning of the First World War and moves over roughly a 20-year period, sort of jumping forward into periods of time, and starts with a man that travels to Vienna, and he's a journalist, and he meets someone there that he strikes up a relationship with, and so it follows that relationship over time and involves a sanatorium in a snow-capped mountain. So you see the beautiful inside covers of these pages sort of showing this landscape. And Sebastian Faulks is an author I've actually never read before, even though he's an incredibly popular author here in England. And actually, when I went for my very first job here in London and went for a job interview and was talking about how much I love reading with my new boss, and she was saying, oh, I love Sebastian Faulks' writing, and I thought then, like, oh, I should really read Sebastian Faulks, but I never did, but I've heard great things about this new novel, so maybe this will be the first time to read him. So those are all the books that I'm going to talk about. Like I said, let me know if you've read any of these and would recommend any of them for me to take on holiday and to read, because yeah, I want to have some really good quality reading time during my vacation, and so I'm looking forward to that. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.